Okay, we are going to get started. If people can come on in and take a seat, and we'll register people. If you come in late, we'll register you after. So welcome, everybody. This is the Integrative Community Practitioner Forum. And we do have some sites dialing in. We do ask those folks to put their computers on mute so we don't get that feedback. This talk is part of an interprofessional series that's focusing on non-drug methods for chronic pain, so we do hope that you'll come to some of our other talks. We have two more coming up. One is in January, and that will be focused on sleep and how that impacts pain. And the other one is in March, and that will be by Hélène Langevin, and she'll be talking about acupuncture and the fascia. So they should both be great. I have parking passes. If you didn't get one, please grab me. Let's see. Now I can just introduce our speakers. So we have two great people here today. Kim Evans. Kim. Oh, what a welcoming audience. I'm going to be brief about their bios. They both have pretty long bios, but this is the quickie version. Kim is a registered dietitian and food enthusiast. Her training includes a bachelor's degree in nutrition from Michigan State University and a master's in healthcare administration from Marlborough College, and advanced training in integrative nutrition and functional medicine. Kim has a private practice called Whole Health Nutrition, and she works at the University of Vermont Medical Center in the nutrition department. Dianne Villani. Dianne is a family nurse practitioner and a specialist in functional medicine. She received her master's degree in nursing from UVM College of Nursing and Health Sciences and is pursuing her advanced training in functional medicine. Dianne has a private practice called Trillium Integrative Medicine. So I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Kara. So we kind of thought it would be fitting.
Wait, you don't want a mic?
Do I need a mic? Okay. I have never been accused of being quiet. We kind of thought it would be fitting to really start with just a quick demo of one of my favorite breakfast items as just a real example of how do we actually get what we're going to be spending the next 90 minutes talking about to the table. So we're going to be demoing a really quick kale breakfast bowl, and yes, I did just say kale and breakfast in the same sentence. So I want to share just quickly before I start this demo that I'm very excited that the UVM Medical Center is part of a collaboration called the Teaching Kitchen Collaboration, which is a collaboration of 27 institutions across the country that was started with the Harvard School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute of America. And this Teaching Kitchen collaboration is really part of a movement in a field that is emerging called culinary medicine. And there are a few people that are ahead of us in this growing movement of culinary medicine, and they include Tulane, Duke, Stanford, and Harvard, where these institutions are training physicians how to cook. And the reason being is that we know for our patients that we can enhance well-being when we not only enhance nutrition literacy, but also culinary literacy. It's one thing to talk about nutrition, it's one thing to know about nutrition, it's one thing to talk about food, and then it's another thing to actually empower people to get it to the plate. So that's kind of what this movement is about. It's about gaining knowledge in the latest evidence about healthy food and then learning how to use it. And it doesn't take much, as I think you can see. This is a pop-up table with 4 of my favorite kitchen gadgets. Yes, I travel with these everywhere I go. A very sharp knife. You only need one in your kitchen. The sharper, the better. A microplane zester, this is a real necessity. A pair of tongs when you're demoing things in public because people don't like you to put your hands in their food. But when I'm at home, I just use my hands. And then a lemon squeezer. And using these 4 surgical instruments in our kitchen, we're going to create something really beautiful together in just a moment. And then our wonderful Shannon, this is my Vanna. She's a nutritionist and a yoga instructor that works with some of our patients. We're going to build a little fun breakfast bowl together. So part of what we're doing with this Teaching Kitchen collaboration in the field of culinary medicine is really exploring together 27 institutions from across the country how to build culinary medicine models that are evidence-based, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, that are perhaps reimbursable, or maybe at least they would have been until a couple weeks ago, and that are practical, that really help patients build confidence in the kitchen. Because we know that kitchen is the heart of our home. And when people are confident in their kitchen, they also gain a bit of confidence in themselves. The research already tells us, mostly done with diabetic patients, that patients who cook one more meal at home per week from scratch have better health outcomes, lower hemoglobin A1Cs. Now, why do we only know this about the diabetic population? Well, that was the only population that has been studied so far. But I think that the chronic pain population is a really great target audience to maybe do some further exploration and research around. Again, we know that when we intervene in people's eating habits, not only can we make a difference in their chronic conditions and chronic pain, but we can also intervene on some of the key morbid conditions that also influence inflammation in the body, those being obesity and type 2 diabetes. Okay, so now, again, we're going to get really busy helping to strategize. So I'm just going to demo something super quick. Yes, my kale is wilting a little bit. Now, a lot of times when I say kale to people, let alone kale for breakfast, they kind of roll their eyes because kale is a superfood, but not everybody likes to eat it. Not everybody likes to eat it raw. So I'm just going to explain really quickly that this is not your average kale. How many of you are already familiar with this kale? Some of you. So this is dinosaur kale or lacinato kale. And what we love about it is that it's great raw, so you don't really need to cook it. And it doesn't have that bitter, off-putting flavor that many people think about when they think about kale, and it tends to be kind of hearty. So we're just going to strip our kale, and Shannon's going to finish stripping the kale over there. I'm just going to demo one quick little bowl, and then we're going to massage our kale. And then we're going to take our super sharp knife, and we are going to chiffonade our kale. And these are all things that we teach our clients or our patients to do in their own kitchen, which is to develop a comfort with a knife, to become familiar with these foods like kale, sensory, not just trying them, but feeling them, smelling them, playing with them. And we're going to put it in a rather big bowl. So that was this thing right here. And then we're going to take our lemon, which is not only full of vitamin C, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and we're just going to squeeze a little lemon juice. Now, lots of the really important nutrients of the lemon are in the peel, so I did buy an organic peel. The lemon zest is full of limonades, which are the essential oils of the lemon. So we're just going to lightly zest, because if you get into the white part, that's where it starts to get bitter. And then the elixir of life, just a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. We're going to talk a lot about fats tonight, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Fat is no longer a 4-letter word. It was never a 4-letter word. I do know how to spell the word fat. Well, fats, I guess that's a 4-letter word. Lots of misunderstanding about fats and health. We're going to put in a pinch of salt. I am using kosher salt. Most chefs use kosher salt in the kitchen because it's easy to feel how much salt you're adding, so you can add just the right amount. And then we're going to go really up high with our salt, so it covers all the surface area without getting, really more than we want or need. And then really simply, we're going to take our full fat, whole milk Greek yogurt. This does happen to be one of my favorite brands. It's Fage. I love it because it has 5 different strains of bacteria in it. We are going to talk tonight about probiotics and the role of probiotics and prebiotics and inflammation. We're going to put that in the bottom of our little fun martini glass here. And then we are going to top it with a prebiotic food, something that the bacteria can eat. This is farro. How many of you are already farro eaters? Some of you. So farro is an ancient wheat berry, and we're just going to throw that on here. Now, again, I did say this is a breakfast bowl, so I had this, from leftover from my last night's dinner. Everything's just in the fridge, ready to go. We are going to top it with our kale salad. And of course, everybody eats their breakfast out of a martini glass.
Is the farro cooked? Or?
It is cooked. I pre-cooked it. And then we're going to just put on a few organic blueberries full of antioxidants, some pumpkin seeds, which are really rich in magnesium, another nutrient we're going to talk about tonight, and a few sliced almonds. And this, my friends, in 10 minutes or less, is a beautiful, plant-forward, antioxidant-rich, healthy fat, kale breakfast bowl. Now, quickly I will say that I learned of this dish as part of our Teaching Kitchen collaboration. 5 of us from the UVM Medical Center took a trip to Google foods in Manhattan. And I could say a lot about it, but that's not really what we're here to talk about, other than to say that as an organization, Google is so forward-thinking about the health and their well-being of their employees that they have multiple cafeterias within their headquarters, both in California and here in New York City, where they cook food like this for their employees for breakfast or lunch and dinner for free. And they have teaching kitchens on every floor of their headquarters where they give cooking classes to their employees on their lunch break. So I fell in love with this because I'm constantly looking for fun breakfast ideas that are savory instead of sweet, that pull veggies into yet another meal. And let me tell you, it's absolutely delicious, and you're all going to get to try it in a couple of minutes. So what's going to happen next is this table. We're going to move it over here. I am going to take off my chef apron, and I'm going to move into my dietitian role. And then Dianne and I are going to co-present. Shannon's going to work on prepping some samples for everybody to try, and then we'll just come around and we'll have you pass them down. Does that sound good? Who doesn't love a nighttime lecture where you get food? Okay, will you grab that end? And if you want the recipe for this, it is on the Whole Health Nutrition website. It's super easy to make. You want my apron? All righty. Any questions about that so far? Go ahead.
When you mentioned that farro is a prebiotic, are you going to go into that?
A little bit, yes. What I'm really saying is it's a resistant starch.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you blend that? Sure. You can blend anything. And then you call it a kale berry smoothie. Yeah.
Do you know how some of the stuff?
No. Yeah, no, you can definitely blend it, and it wouldn't change the nutritional value. If you juice it, we're talking about something different. But yes, you can definitely blend it. Okay, let's see how it goes with technology. Oh, there we go. It went quite well.
Wow.
Going back just for a minute, I mean, who wouldn't love to have this as their kitchen, right? But really the idea is that, the kitchen should be the heart of your home. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It certainly doesn't need to look like this to have it be the heart of your home. It can be a pop-up kitchen. We do cooking classes at the food shelf. That's the heart of that home. So really just the idea is embracing the kitchen as a place where healing really happens. And when it comes to managing chronic pain and many other health conditions, good food can make great medicine. The nutritional influences on the physiological and neurological complexities of chronic pain have been well established in the literature, and we're going to talk about that tonight. And yet often we have found go overlooked in clinical practice. When's the last time your physician asked you, what did you have for breakfast or lunch? Or when did you ask your patients, hey, what did you have for breakfast today? These are really important questions to be asking and thinking about. So today we're going to really talk about the up-to-date science, a little bit of culinary techniques to just solidify the principles, about a plant-forward anti-inflammatory diet. And so Kara told me I had to have 3 objectives, or told us, and so here they are. Our hope is that you will understand the impact that diet can have on the progression from adaptive and physiological inflammation to chronic inflammation and disease aggravation, that you will see some of the evidence-based nutrition interventions for the treatment of chronic pain disorders, and we will end by talking about a case study of a patient with fibromyalgia, and that you will apply this knowledge via the case study review to build some practical skills in nutrition counseling and culinary literacy. So we know that chronic inflammation is the immune system working overtime, and that inflammation and the immune response brings along a cascade of biological processes leading to the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, including interleukin-1 and interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor. We know that components of the immune system can injure normal tissue, joint, and glands, and we know that a pro-inflammatory diet can result in the aggravation of disease and chronic conditions. So food for thought. And this is kind of a great launching place. The food you eat, this is Anne Wigmore, can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. And this is one of my favorite quotes because I think it's very true across the board, but it's also the case that foods that might be your most powerful form of medicine might also be my slowest form of poison. And so sometimes this is something that we have to tease out when we're working with our patients, which is really, is that healthy food healthy for you? So I can say more about that as we go through the evening as well. So diet is a two-way street, and the nutrients play a role in both promoting and combating the inflammatory process. We have a lot of research around fibromyalgia, arthritis, sports medicine, and degenerative disorders that reflect these principles. So when we talk about nutrition approaches to pain management, we're really focusing on changes in diet, the use of supplements in some cases, and some skills in the kitchen to make these things come to life. I am going to turn it over to Dianne. So we're bouncing around.
Oh, I have to do this?
Yes, you have to. I can be your Vanna. Do you want me to change the slides?
Vanna,
okay.
Thank you. Nicely done.
And can I also just say, so Dianne and I work together in 2 separate practices, whole health nutrition and Trillium integrative medicine, but we share one building or one office, which is really nice. I really appreciate what Dianne brings, and so if I have a patient that was referred for nutrition and we want to really strategize and integrate our care, then we co-refer patients back and forth.
Yes. So basically, I am the science geek to Kim's, I don't know.
Food-loving self?
No, I was going to say something more, something, I don't know, something more interesting than that. But I think that that's going to be reflected in the parts that I cover tonight are just a little bit more nuts and bolts. And so what is inflammation? Just a brief overview. I mean, inflammation has become a big buzzword, right? Like everybody's talking about inflammation and mostly talking about it in terms of how it's bad. But I think that it's really important for us to remember that this is a physiological process with a purpose. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Just want you to move over a little bit in front of the mic.
Oh.
So you're harder to hear.
Am I harder to hear? I'm not as loud as her. See, she's the exciting one. So Inflammation is a physiological process with a purpose, and in particular, acute inflammation is generally adaptive, right? It's something that we want. If you cut yourself, if you get exposed to some sort of bacteria, you want that inflammatory response. Unless we're talking about allergy or anaphylaxis, which is a whole other thing. The problem comes in when we have chronic inflammation, which is just simply a persistent acute phase response and causes injury by the ongoing, it causes injury to the tissues by this ongoing inflammatory process, or by the failure of the body's counter-regulatory processes. And that's important, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, too. So it's not just what's coming in, it's how the body is responding. Our arrows got...
They move.
So again, just briefly to cover what happens in inflammation. We have the antecedents. That's what the patient walks in the room with. So we're talking about their genetic background, epigenetics that's influenced by their environment, and sort of what Kim was talking about, what is one person's medicine is another person's poison based on the groundwork that they came in with. Then there are the inducers. Those are the molecular triggers that include advanced glycation end products, and we'll talk a little bit more about those too. Toxins, which can actually, we can be exposed to them by food, and a healthful diet can actually modulate the body's ability to move toxins through. So that's another piece where it goes both ways, and that's really important to keep in mind. And of course, free radicals. The next part of this process is the sensors, and these are the cells that recognize a problem. That includes things like dendritic cells and the macrophages, those cells that are, waking up and saying, hey, there's a problem. And then finally, there are the endogenous mediators, the substances that the body makes that hopefully are going to mediate inflammation and dampen it down once it's done its job. And that includes the eicosanoids and autocoids, angiotensin, neuroangiotensin, even histamine and serotonin are all endogenous mediators of inflammation. And then the reason that this is, I think, particularly important with food is because we know that the mucosal surfaces are the largest source of exposure to the triggers, to the inducers. So in particular, the end glycation, or the advanced glycation end products, they come in through our foods in various ways, and they really promote a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation. And we want to make sure that people know how to cook to decrease the amount of those end products, and how to eat foods that are going to help their bodies process those and move them along. Okay? So Kim asked me to talk about what do I see in practice. So, my typical patient is the patient that I think, a lot of providers feel really frustrated with, or not with the patient in particular, but frustrated with the situation, right? They're the person that walks in and they've got joint pain, they've got indigestion, they're overweight, they're complaining of fatigue. It's all that sort of vague, I don't feel good. And so they're being treated with a PPI, they're being treated with an NSAID or even an opiate for the joint pain. All of those symptoms are being treated in one way or another, and yet they still don't feel well. So what's going on there? What's the common denominator? And that's the whole functional medicine approach, is what's the common denominator? It's great to treat people's symptoms, and I do that in my practice too, but we want to get to what's going on underneath. And more often than not, what's going on underneath is inflammation. And the notes that I have here, the notes that Kim put in this slide for me are BAM. So this is what we're looking at. This is how inflammation relates to all of these things that we see in practice.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn again.
Okay. So I was saying to Diane that, some things about this slide have changed. Meaning people are not still wearing these outfits and having these ridiculous hairdos.
And the mustache.
Maybe the mustache, I don't know. But some things about this slide haven't changed. And that's this stuff right here. The Red Baron pizza, the Raisin Bran, but I thought Bran was good for me. The corn dogs, there's a little broccoli in there. So, it's not a new acronym. We call this the SAD diet. And part of this conversation about the SAD diet is really all of us beginning to recognize the dangers in what appears so innocent. I will say, I am, as a dietitian, a little bit of a grocery cart snoop. Like, I am looking at what people are buying in the grocery store. So shop somewhere that I'm not shopping. And I'm not really judging. Maybe I am a tiny bit. But really, I'm just curious. And it always surprises me. I'm like, people still buy this crap. Like, oh my goodness. So here we are looking at the standard American, or the SAD diet. And so, what are some of the dietary causes of inflammation that we might be seeing in this slide? And the first one has to do with some of these highly processed, refined carbohydrates, including things like cereals that cleverly advertise that they are a whole grain on the front of the package. We know that elevated glycemic loads, or indexes of foods, have a direct association with increased high sensitivity C-reactive protein, biological markers of inflammation. What else do we see in this slide that relates to chronic pain or inflammation? Well, excess calorie intake. So we're seeing lots of foods on here that are very calorically dense, meaning they got a lot of calories for the little bit that they're providing, but they're not very nutrient dense. And we know that there is an association between increased adipose tissue, or adiposity, and again, pro-inflammatory tissue. And that's not just to say overweight people, because visceral or white body fat can be present in producing inflammatory biomarkers, whether the person is presenting as overweight with a BMI or not. So don't rule out all of the people in a healthy BMI from having this as part of their reality. I like to tell stories when I talk because I think it makes things a little bit more real, but the other day I was at TD Bank in Winooski, and I was driving through to deposit my paycheck from Whole Health Nutrition, and I handed it to this cute little teller. She was a tiny little thing, and I give her my check, and she comes back and she's like, you're a dietitian, you're a nutritionist, I need to come and see you. And then she said something that I thought was really interesting as a provider. She said, people think that just because I'm thin, I'm healthy. I gotta tell you, I have the worst eating habits. And I was like, that is so important to be knowing. And then also what we're seeing here is a lot of saturated fats, which we're going to talk about in a few slides. There's a lot of confusion on the world of fats, but saturated fats, particularly when they come from animal products, are a source of arachidonic acid. That just doesn't sound good. And it doesn't sound good because it isn't good. It activates specific inflammatory pathways involving prostaglandins. So the standard American diet is a diet that is high in refined starches, sugar, saturated fats. We didn't even talk about the trans fats. Luckily, the legislation is suggesting they will be out of our food supply by 2018. And these things complicate chronic pain. And when you couple chronic pain with opioid treatment, it can further derange glucose metabolism through several mechanisms, including the slowing down of gastric motility, which delays the absorption of glucose and delays insulin response. Also, many of these refined carbohydrates and sugar have the same receptor sites in the brain as opioids. So they kind of go hand in hand in creating dependency and cravings. There is some research that was done at the Illinois Institute of Technology, basically looking at diets, even a single meal. They did some markers of inflammation, high in calories and fat, and readily available carbohydrates induced acute inflammatory responses. So, what are those foods? Recognizing the dangers in what appears so innocent that trigger inflammation. You know, it's obviously a long list, and this is probably not anything that anybody hasn't thought about or before, but, you know, refined grains. What is a refined grain?
Can we get the handout, or should I be taking copious notes?
I think you can get the handouts.
It'll be on our website.
Yeah. So, you know, refined grains, again, I could spend a lot of time talking about that, as I'm sure Dianne could, but if it's not whole, you saw the farro over there. If it doesn't look on your plate like it did growing in nature, it's a refined grain. When I ask people, do you eat whole grains? They say, yes, I eat whole wheat bread. I'm like, well, my bagels are whole wheat. Awesome. High glycemic index foods. Your yogurt with all the fruit on the bottom. That's a high glycemic index food. So we're not talking necessarily about all the straightforwards. Processed meats, trans fats, and some saturated fats. This is a big one. We'll talk about it in a minute. Omega-6 fats, polyunsaturated fats. Those fall into the confusing fats. People think if it's not saturated, it must be good for me. Not necessarily. High heat oils. I think Dianne mentioned and alluded to that already. You know, not all oils are meant to be used in the same way, and depending on how we treat them, they can either reduce the inflammatory burden or increase the inflammatory burden in the diet. Processed foods with additives, colors, preservatives, sweeteners. This is a big one, MSG, and anything that is related to MSG, hydrolyzed proteins, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, hydrolyzed soy protein, it's MSG. And it's a little tricky because MSG is a naturally occurring molecule, so is hydrolyzed vegetable proteins, and so you can buy foods that say all natural, like the Cheetos that my kids try to talk me into buying. Like, what is all natural about a Cheeto? Seriously. How dumb do they think I am? I'm not talking about my kids, I'm talking about the food manufacturers. Again, high sugar intakes, watching for the hidden sources. A patient comes in, their diet looks super great, and then I start talking to them about all the ketchup they use. Ketchup is a good source of sugar. Surprising, right? And then, of course, excess calorie intake.
You skipped feedlot dairy.
Oh, I did. How convenient. Yeah, so dairy and, you know, cattle that are fed corn tend to have more inflammatory burden than grass-fed. So, who doesn't love Michael Pollan? Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So what is on the other side of the SAD diet? It's the GLAD diet. And then Dianne challenged me to come up with what does that actually mean? And I came up with this. Got to love anti-inflammatory diets.
Nice.
How about that? So we really guide our patients to eat more protein when they're practicing an anti-inflammatory diet, but plant-forward protein, and we're going to talk about what that really means. So plant-based at every meal and snack, especially if they are also having a meal or a beverage that will contain or contains rapidly moving carbohydrates. So full disclosure, I used to own a bakery. We all have an inner jerk that needs to be fed on occasion, meaning that there's a time and a place for those sweetie treats. But again, when we compare them with a high protein food, it reduces the glycemic load, it decreases the inflammatory burden. And these are things, again, we can talk to our patients about because it's called the art of compromise. Okay, so you're not willing to give up that Kit Kat bar at 3. Could you have a handful of almonds with it? Oh, now you're talking. And, you know, over time, then maybe it's just moving to a dark chocolate covered almond, or if we really had our way, it would be a Brazil nut. When we're talking, it's a process, guys. When we're talking about plant-forward diets, I just want to be clear, we're not talking about juicing. There is a place for juicing, but when you juice a vegetable, it is basically like a lot of sugar and no pulp. Our goal when we're working with our clients is between 7 and 9 serving of veggies and fruits per day. The average American eats less than 3, and that includes right here at the medical center, because we've surveyed our employees, and that's what the results showed us. And we surveyed across all populations that our employees were eating less than 3 servings of vegetables and fruits per day. That's why we started giving it away. Now you know. Free fruit day. It's not just to be nice. It's to improve your health. So one study using an anti-inflammatory food index found that anti-inflammatory diet consisting of fish, fruits, veggies, and olive oil was associated with lower C-reactive protein. We talked about that already. So how do we do it? Here is one of the tools that we frequently use in our office. It is Dr. Wheel's Anti-Inflammatory Food Pyramid. I love it because it's plant forward. You can see at the bottom, it's based in colorful veggies and fruits. I love it because it's really about maximizing nutritional intake, and it really is reflective of the Mediterranean food pyramid, high in fish. I'm really enjoying this pointer, by the way. A little bit of red wine as the optional item, a little bit of dark chocolate, and those healthy fats like olive oil. Again, the Mediterranean diet has been known to reduce plasma levels of, again, C-reactive protein, as well as tumor necrosis factor alpha and necrosis factor kappa B, all markers of inflammation. This is also a diet that is beautifully high in antioxidants, which protect our bodies from oxidative damage. And this as a tool is very patient-friendly because it is visual, but it is directive, and generally my patients tell me that it feels doable.
So I noticed this is essentially a no-meat diet minus the fish.
It is a plant-forward diet, yes.
Is there a place for meat in that diet?
There is a place for everything in a diet. Meaning, you know, as a provider, and I think Dianne would probably agree with me as well, I really meet my clients where they're at. We are trying to get more plants to the plate. And so helping clients have these really targeted goals that they can look at and see, oh, you know, you want me to be eating 4 to 5 servings of veggies and 3 servings per day of fruit. That's a great starting place, a great goal. If I put that on my plate, I'm going to conveniently have less room for the other meats.
So where would you place meat on the pyramid, I guess, was really the end result?
Well, it depends. If it's, you know, grass-fed beef, I'd put it, you know, right up there. Did that kind of answer your question? I mean, again, when we look at the research, eating from the blue zones, Okinawa, Japan, Loma Linda, California, Sardinia, and Italy, the people that live the longest, healthiest lifespans eat a plant-forward diet. And I work with lots of folks from paleo to vegan, and, you know, we start where they're at, and we try to just increase the plants that are on their plate. Anything you want to say about that?
All I would say is that being a plant-forward diet is not, it's not exclusive of meats and healthy meats, but I think that the forward is the important word in that name there. The more plants we can get into people, the better.
I know it's a point.
Yeah, I mean, you won't, yeah. Hi.
I noticed one plant oil you have left out, and I'd like to have your opinion on coconut oil.
We're gonna, thank you. Transition. Any other questions before I go into the fats, the confusing, the good, the confusing, and the ugly? No. And again, this isn't mine. This is Dr. Wheel's. So it's a very useful tool for me in my practice. So I share it with you.
What are your thoughts on just dairy in general? Because I have read that some find that dairy as a group can cause inflammation. I see the cheese on there and yogurt.
I'm going to get to that in the next slide too. Anybody else? I like it. Again, I would put it in here or in here, you know, great fish, shellfish, preferably wild as opposed to farmed. It's hard to find good wild shrimp though and other kinds of shellfish.
What is it about the cooked Asian mushroom? Is there something about cooking?
Do you know? This is Andrea, everybody. She's also part of our integrative care team.
Mushrooms have toxins in them, and so actually Dr. Weil, in a study with, recommends that you never eat mushrooms raw. It's a huge bummer to me because I like them.
Yeah.
But cooking them denatures the product, basically. I don't remember the specific name, whatever it was, but yeah.
And you'll also see, though, that it is wild mushrooms, so shiitake, cremini, oyster, yeah, some of those more obscure mushrooms. We're not talking about button, hen of the woods, maitake mushrooms, great stuff. You know, lots of people will use mushrooms medicinally, making changa tea and other ways to incorporate those wild mushrooms. Okay, others?
What are your thoughts on soy?
Oh, that's such a tough question. Generally speaking, my thoughts on soy are that it can have a really helpful role in reducing inflammation in small amounts and from the right sources, meaning not processed soy, but soy that occurs naturally like tempeh or edamame.
Fermented soys in particular.
And
like
miso.
and miso.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep buzzing and hold. I love all the questions, and this obviously seems to be getting a lot of them. What I will also say, again, this is downloadable. There's 4 more pages that go with it. It's a great tool, and if you are providers and you leave with nothing else than an extra tool in your pocket to refer your patients to, whether you're a carnivore, a paleo, a vegan, my clients find a lot of value in this tool.
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, again, addressing the idea of dairy and or soy or meat or whatever. This is a starting point. This is a place where we start with people, and then, like Kim said, we meet people where they are, and hopefully move them where, you know, they will end up the best. So, you know, for one person, dairy is great. For another, not so much.
Again, what is healthy for one is not necessarily healthy for the next. Okay. Again, fats, not a 4-letter word, but definitely seem to be very confusing for a lot of people. The ugly, that's not so confusing. We all got the email, trans fats are not so good. They do hide in foods. Foods can be labeled 0 grams of trans fat and still have trans fat in them, but yes, it's true. That's the wonderful way our food industry works, but that should become a non-issue soon. Where things I think are a little bit less clear are the confusing. I'm just going to buzz through them kind of quickly, and that is to say that polyunsaturated fats, or not all unsaturated fats, are the same. PUFAs, we call them, include omega-3 fats, which across the board are pretty darn good for us, but they also include omega-6. Both are considered to be essential fatty acids. They're linoleic and linolenic acid. In the world of nutrition, essential means you need to eat it because your body can't make it. But again, in the world of PUFAs, not all omega-6 fats are the same, and I will say a little bit more clearly what I mean in a minute, so that's why omega-6s are confusing. I will break it down. Omega-9 fats, lots of people will take these supplements, 369, because somehow it's better to have more than just an omega-3. Your body can make omega-9 fats. So if you are going to use a fish oil supplement, I usually steer people straight towards the omega-3s because we eat way more omega-6s than we really need. Our body already makes omega-9s, so save yourself some money and fewer numbers to remember and just get the omega-3s. Coconut oil. We've long since demonized coconut oil because it's solid at room temperature. So it is a saturated fat. But there's a lot of, I think, epidemiological evidence and convincing research that really puts coconut oil on the more favorable side of oils as an anti-inflammatory oil, particularly because it contains lauric acid, which has anti-inflammatory properties. It also has polyphenols, which are have been shown to be helpful in laboratory studies in rats with arthritis. The thing probably, though, that I like about coconut oil the most is that it is a high heat oil. And where many people go wrong with confusing fats is how they treat them in their cooking process. I could spend a lot of time talking about this. We have like this many more slides to get through, though. Extra virgin olive oil is over here as a good fat, and the monounsaturated fats, it is a good fat. It is a good fat for dipping, dressing, marinating, roasting, indirect heat. Put it on your face. Put it in your hair. But please don't put it in a pan and turn the heat up really high because olive oil has a really low smoke point. Coconut oil, high smoke point, good for high heat cooking. Olive oil, low smoke point. When you heat an oil above its smoke point, you are essentially turning it into a trans fat. Now, we have just pretty much outlawed them in this country from our food supply, so why are we making them in our kitchen? Our kitchen should be the heart of our home. We should not be trans fat factories. I could also say that certain monounsaturated fats like canola oil is a little controversial, but I'm not going to get into that. Saturated animal fats, red meat, butter, it does tend to have, now, there is a lot of different essential fatty acids that are contained within these groups of fats, but saturated animal fats are a bit higher in that arachidonic acid, so they do upregulate inflammatory cytokines. That's what the research tells us. So we want to minimize our intake of them. Same thing with dairy fat. Interestingly, from an immunological perspective, many people respond poorly to whey and casein, but that's the protein that's in dairy. That is not the fat. And the research that I have looked at, and trust me, I've looked hard, suggests that dairy fat is not actually a pro-inflammatory fat. So there is some benefit to, if you are going to eat dairy, to eating full-fat dairy, partly because it doesn't seem to increase inflammation in the body, but what it does more importantly is it helps with the absorption of your fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D in particular. Okay, anything you want to say? Or I'm going to keep talking about these.
The only thing that I wanted to say about the coconut oil and the saturated fats, which again gets back to everybody's different, and some people manage saturated fats better than others, and for providers, it's really important to know, what your patient is and where they fall in that category. And if they're one of those people that actually does well with saturated fats and their cholesterol doesn't go through the roof, coconut oil, great. So.
Yes, thank you.
Just find it out by trying.
That's a really good question, and it's a long, long answer, and yes and no. I mean, sometimes, yes, it's trial and error. Sometimes, somebody comes to me and I see their past labs and I see what their numbers look like. And then other times, I actually look at the genetics and see, what their ApoE status is and all that sort of stuff. So that's a really complicated question, but a good one.
So just to quickly go over some of the good fats, again, omega-3 fats, including EPA and DHA, are very helpful in inflammation reduction, as is alpha-linoleic acid, which is the short-chain omega-3 fats that comes from plant sources, such as hemp seed and chia seed and flaxseed. They are not the same fatty acid, though. So just, sometimes I'll ask people what their sources of omega-3 fats are, and they're like, I eat lots of flaxseed, which is awesome, doesn't have the same function. Gamma-linoleic acid, which comes from evening primrose oil, borage oil, is an omega-6 fat, but it has been demonstrated to have anti-inflammatory properties. We already talked about the monounsaturated fats. Our goal is to have a ratio, I like to say 1-to-1, but the literature doesn't agree with me, of 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 fats in our diet. Okay? That doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody other than to say that the average American diet has a ratio of 20-to-1. 20 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. And partly that's because omega-3s are hard to come by. They come from fish. And fish. And fish. And most people are not eating a lot of fish, let alone fatty fish, let alone wild fish, which is really, where those omega-3s come from. So there is a value to helping patients learn to balance their essential fatty acid profile by eating more omega-3s from fish and flaxseed and chia seed, eating more hemp oil for omega-6, eating more monounsaturated fats like avocados and extra virgin olive oil, and learning that omega-6 fats come from anything with vegetable oil in it, corn oil, soybean oil. The not so great omega-6 is the arachidonic acid. That's a lot about fat. So, I told you that the first starting place with helping patients out on jumping on the anti-inflammatory or the gotta love anti-inflammatory diets, the GLAD diet is really the power to the protein. So endogenous pain relievers, pain relieving neurotransmitters that live inside of our body are protein derivatives. We have to have the amino acids to build our natural pain dampening mechanisms. Protein is also necessary to build and maintain muscle and cartilage. It activates glucagon, which is an important hormone that comes from our liver and helps to balance blood sugar levels without the involvement of insulin. And when well chosen, can help to decrease inflammation. What does that mean, well chosen?
Grass-fed beef.
It means, yes, and that broccoli and spinach and other green leafy veggies, pound for pound, has more protein than beef. What's that? In pounds, though. If you take a pound of spinach and a pound of beef, you're going to have more protein in a pound of spinach.
And calories. The slides are-
And calories. Less calories, more protein. So the real winner there is plant-based proteins. Any questions about the protein? Again, well chosen from fish and plants, contain anti-inflammatory agents, as we saw referenced.
I have a question about the fish.
Sure.
I hear a lot about heavy toxins in fish. Is there a certain type of fish that would be better than other types of fish, or types of fish we should avoid completely?
So I always go to a couple of sources for that information because, to be honest with you, it's always changing. And the Environmental Working Group is a great resource, as well as Sustainable Seafood Watch, because they're really the ones that are giving up-to-date information on, both sustainable fishing practices, But generally speaking, salmon is a low mercury fish, as is many whitefish, halibut, those kind of fishes. Wild caught, thank you. Okay.
Can you comment on radiation since it's
I would, but I'm going to stick with the anti-inflammatory kind of topic, because we, again, have many more slides to go through and 35 minutes to do it.
So, from an environmental perspective, broccoli uses an immense amount of water, so do almonds.
Yes, they do. You're right.
Location like
Yep.
Vermont, or as you get more central into the country,
Yep.
fish become harder to come by.
Yep.
Is there a general list of other options that might be more seasonally specific
Mm-hmm.
or regionally specific?
Yeah, I mean, any green leafy veggies are going to have higher protein. So Swiss chard, kale, it's really just illustrating the example that plants are a good source of protein. But yes, definitely increasing the locally sourced. Okay, so we are now moving into the role of vitamins and the specific role that they play in the pain pathway. Again, some of these are both vitamins from food as well as the specific use of supplemental vitamins in certain cases. So B vitamins certainly come to mind. Deficiencies are associated with a variety of diseases, such as neuropathies and other painful diseases. Do you want to speak about that at all in terms of testing or? Okay. No. One thing that I will say is that when we have patients come into the office and I ask them, have they ever had their vitamin B levels tested? The answer is typically no. And so it's just, again, a piece of information as a baseline, knowing that there is a role in vitamin B deficiency and the pain pathway. As well, vitamin E, gamma tocopherol decreases pro-inflammatory necrosis factor, again, kappa B, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, and inhibits prostaglandin synthesis. Vitamin E comes from things like wheat germ and sunflower seeds, things that are typically not found on most people's plates. So again, just sharing this knowledge with clients. And then there's vitamin C, ascorbic acid, which is a powerful antioxidant. It defends against lipid peroxidation and helps to decrease high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Now, some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, right, vitamin C. I will share a story. I was training for my first marathon. This was probably 10 years ago. I was a ballet dancer. That was my history, which meant I was kind of a light eater. And so when I started running marathons, I kept eating like a ballerina. It wasn't a pretty picture. And I was getting injured, and I was having a lot of plantar fasciitis and shin splints and a lot of inflammation that was sport specific. And I was kind of puzzled. And so then I did, what I would do for any of my clients, and that is I analyzed my eating habits. And I found that I was woefully deficient in vitamin C, which was a shocker because I didn't have scurvy. But I'm not a big fruit eater. And so again, it is a useful thing to know about and a useful thing to check with your clients in terms of what is their real consumption of vitamin C rich foods. Because if you're not drinking orange juice or eating a lot of citrus foods, there are other ways to get vitamin C, such as red bell peppers and broccoli and things of that nature. Okay, we're going to move into the minerals. A couple things to note include zinc and copper, which help in wound healing and pain reduction, as well as magnesium, which is a great analgesic for neuropathic pain. Where do we get minerals in our diet? Fruits and veggies, but more specifically from the soil that we're growing our fruits and veggies in. And so in analyzing some of the veggies and fruits that grace our grocery store shelves, we know that the content of minerals that is present in them is quite low, specifically in magnesium. So this can be a great mineral to be supplementing in our patients' diets. Okay. Does anybody know what this is? Has anybody seen a pineapple ever growing in nature? I hadn't. This was very new for me. So again, we're talking about anti-inflammatory diet. We've talked about protein, we've talked about plants, we've talked about some key vitamins such as the B vitamins, some key enzymes to be mindful of, including, minerals, including zinc and magnesium. So now we're going to move into the world of enzymes. It turns out that pineapple contain a really important enzyme that helps reduce inflammation. It's called bromelain. And it's why when you marinate your flank steak in pineapple juice, it gets tender, because it is a fabulous anti-inflammatory enzyme, bromelain. Some people do take it supplementally to help with inflammation, but again, simple addition to a diet, hey, why don't you try eating more pineapple? On a similar note, papaya contains unique protein digesting enzymes called papain or chymopapain, and these enzymes have also been shown to lower inflammation. There is, of course, the wonderful world of fiber, soluble fiber, meaning the mucilages, things like farro or barley or oatmeal, increases interleukin-4, which is an anti-inflammatory agent, and insoluble fiber, the plant-based fiber, increases gut motility and reduces the toxic burden of the body. A high fiber diet has been associated, of course, with weight loss and better digestive health. And then there is a very specific fiber that I'm going to ask Dianne to mention, which is oat bran, which has a very important role in, I'm putting her on the spot.
Yeah. Feeding particular microbes in the gut, the good bugs that we like, and those microbes then secrete butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid, which in turn increases the number of T regulatory cells. So it impacts how the T cells are differentiating. So when I was talking before about the body's own regulatory systems and the ability to downregulate inflammation once it's done its job, that's one of the things we're talking about. And really having a healthy microbiome is a big part of that, and having healthy fiber to feed the right bugs gives you less inflammation. Hooray.
Thank you. Which is a great transition to the next slide and that conversation about prebiotics and probiotics. Again, clinical trials have really helped to corroborate that anti-inflammatory effects seen in prebiotic laboratory studies. I'm not going to go into a big conversation about the immune system and its role in inflammation, because we're really here to talk about more of the nutritional interventions. Somebody had a question about prebiotics. Did I answer your question already?
Sort of, but I'll look into it more.
Okay. Okay. So our immune system, many of us don't realize, really lies mostly in our gut, and it is the interface between our outside world and our inside world. So keeping our gut healthy is a big part of keeping our immune system healthy. There are many things that kind of stress our immune system out, including stress. Medications, a poor diet are all gut dysregulating. And so increasing, when there is an increase in cytokines, those inflammation generating proteins, they not only cross the gut mucosa, but they also cross the blood-brain barrier, which again contributes to disease. That's the bad news. The good news is that there's a lot of very interesting research around certain prebiotics that create their own set of neurotransmitters. One of them in particular is lactobacillus, that also cross the blood-brain barrier and influence health. So many of us have heard that probiotics and prebiotics are good for us, but I think that sometimes we're challenged to really help our patients find ways, again, to get these into their diet and get these onto their plate. When I ask my patients, do you eat yogurt? Typically the answer is yes. And when I dig a little further, it's strawberry Yoplait or something like that. Or if they're really being mindful, it might be something like, and I'm not trying to, say anything negative about any yogurt brands, but Chobani or something of that sort, which is in fact, has some probiotic value, but not typically a lot. So we're really looking to try and help our clients increase the trillions of bacteria that their gut really needs, and getting 1 or 2 strains of bacteria from a yogurt is not really enough to do the trick. So then what are some of our other options? This is a survey, poll of the audience.
Supplements.
Perhaps taking a supplement. Anything else from food?
Apple cider vinegar with the cloudy
Apple cider vinegar with the mother, yes. What else comes to mind?
sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut, non-pasteurized sauerkraut.
Fermented foods.
Any kind of fermented foods. Kombucha, kimchi, kefir, Greek yogurts. Now, again, you guys are probably, a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of being innovative with your diet, but how often are you eating these? Every day. Good. That's not typically what we hear from our patients. So again, leading by example, and sometimes having these things available for your clients to try, your patients to try. I always have kombucha on hand. I'm pouring it for my patients so that they can really experience this for themselves firsthand. Okay. I think we've already talked about fats quite a bit. Again, consuming 3 ounces of fatty fish 5 times per week for 8 weeks significantly lowered the plasma levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines. How many of us are willing to push everything else aside at dinner to eat fish 5 times a week? Wow. So most of us probably not. So I will just say that, I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk a little bit about supplements. I feel a little nervous because I think it can be quite controversial. But if there is a place for a supplement, I believe that talking about omega-3 fats and the role that they have in decreasing inflammation, this is a place to talk about them. So it is often the case that we are recommending to our patients to take an omega-3 supplement, particularly when they're just not great fish eaters. And frankly, it can be a little more affordable to take a fish oil supplement than to try and get wild salmon on the dinner table 5 nights a week. Any questions or comments about that? Go ahead.
What do you think about krill oil as opposed to fish oil?
I like krill oil too. Yep. I don't have a strong feeling about like one versus the other.
I don't know. It's expensive.
What about sardines and mackerel and the little?
Yeah, awesome.
Is that
And canned salmon can be really affordable as well.
affordable?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So that's the other thing, is we're constantly trying to find affordable ways to implement this kind of lifestyle, because certainly it does cost a little more, and we recognize that.
Get a good daily dose of
Yes.
omega-3 from the sardines.
Yep, especially when they're packed in oil as opposed to water.
Are fish genuinely the only source, or is it just the fact that they're the only source with that meaningful content?
Of a long chain omega-3 fats, fish is the source.
Is it something specific about fish, or does it have to do with
It's the cold water temperatures and their body fat, and that's, we just don't, it's the cold water body fat. Other question?
Olive oil?
Olive oil is not an omega-3 fat. It's a monounsaturated fat. It's also very good, but it has a different mechanism of action in the body. Other fat questions? Okay. I'm going to go through some of these a little quickly because I do want to kind of get to our case study. Antioxidants, again, Dianne talked already a little bit about reducing the free radical burden in the body as a strategy to help reduce inflammation. The reason I wanted to show this slide is that I want to kind of make the note that The FDA recommends that we get about between 4,000 and 10,000, it's called ORAC score, oxygen reduction absorption capacity, to have the best influence on health. We often think of things like blueberries as being great for antioxidants, coming in at about an ORAC score of 2,000 in a cup of blueberries. But if you take a look at this here, tart cherry juice, 8 ounces, we're looking at something like 12,000. So this is where we're going to start to pull away from sort of your common foods that might show up on that anti-inflammatory food pyramid and really start to talk about a different world of functional foods, which can help us to increase our ORAC score. So what are functional foods? I love this slide because I think it's really illustrative of the fact that the foods that we eat are biochemically active molecules that interface with our cells, our genes, our epigenetics, as Dianne mentioned, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so functional foods are foods that have a potentially positive effect on health beyond basic nutrition. I will say that you will start to see in our food supply sort of an adulteration of the use of the word functional foods, which is just an attempt to sell us a bunch of manufactured crap and put the word functional on it. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about foods that are high in things like polyphenols and isoflavonoids that help to reduce inflammation. So we're going to get really specific. Ginger. Ginger is not only an anti-nauseal, it has a role in pain treatment, and there is a very specific dose recommendation, 30 to 500 milligrams a day. The pain decreasing effect of ginger is very similar to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as aspirin and ibuprofen. It comes from the gingerol, which is the oil in ginger. It inhibits the action of COX-1 and 2 enzymes and reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines that lead to pain and swelling. Dry ginger is more potent than fresh, but fresh ginger is great too. Here's the thing most people don't know. You don't have to peel it.
Really?
True. You can zest it using that zester, leave the skin on. The gingerol actually comes from right underneath the skin, so that's where you're getting all of that good essential oil from the ginger. I mean, you can peel it if you want to, but it's hard to peel ginger, and if you do peel it, save the peels in your freezer and steep them in hot water and drink them so that you're getting all of those good anti-inflammatories.
That looks like a picture of crystallized sugar ginger. That's not what you recommend.
Well, I will be honest and say that I took this slide from a different presentation that I did for marathon runners. And yes, for marathon runners, I actually recommend this as a source of fuel during a run where you do need the fast-moving carbohydrates. But no, powdered ginger, ginger juice, ginger tea, so helping our clients to use this as a medicinal food. We mentioned already and saw the slide, tart cherries. Again, these are COX-2 inhibitors, tart cherries. 45 cherries a day have been shown to reduce circulating concentrations of inflammatory enzymes. That research was done right here at UVM by Declan Conley, also using marathon runners as his cohort. But he has a study that is called the efficacy of a tart cherry juice in preventing symptoms of muscle damage that was published in the Journal of Sports Medicine in 2006. It is not only an anti-inflammatory, it is an antioxidant. And if anybody wonders how much 45 cherries is in a juiced form, it's about 6 ounces. How many of you have used tart cherry juice? And how do you use it? A shot? She's doing tart cherry juice shots. again, I have so many stories. I'm a story girl. I'll tell this one story. I had probably the toughest client I've ever had, meaning that he came in, he was quite an overweight man, he had chronic pain, he had knee pain, he was borderline diabetic, and he came in with his arms crossed like this and just looked at me. It was like really clear that somebody made him come, which is often how people show up in our office against their will. And when he started going through his food diary, his food log, it started like this. What do you have for breakfast? Coffee and a donut. What do you have for lunch? Nothing. What do you have for dinner? He was very serious when he said to me, my oven in my kitchen is a filing cabinet. He was self-employed, a businessman in like forestry or something. And he had 2 boys that were really busy in baseball, and they usually had Domino's pizza for dinner. And he was not making this stuff up. He said, when I go to restaurants, I order steak, and I look over and what other people are eating, and I say to my boys, you see those people over there? Kind of like the subline was like those freaks. They're eating what my plate ate. And he was like really proud of this. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, if we can get this man to change his eating habits, we can change anything. So slowly over time, he started changing things. He's just one thing. I'm like, let's just pick one thing. We started with the Diet Coke. He's like, okay. And then he had one, and he emails me, and he's like, damn, my knees hurt. But anyhow, he found, my point in telling you this is he sent me an email. He's like, I'm on a fishing trip, and my buddies are drinking beer and eating donuts, and it's 9. I am eating quinoa and drinking kombucha and enjoying it. There is something wrong. However, then he did say, is it okay to mix my tart cherry juice with vodka? And I said, of course. This is a true story. I am not making this up. And he has lost a bunch of weight. He feels great. And every once in a while, he's like, I just want to try and have the donut and see what happens. And he says, is it placebo? Maybe some of it, but the point is the man feels better. And so if he perceives that every time he eats a donut, his knees hurt, I am a happy woman. Green tea, another functional food. Lots of great research is well done at UVM about the role of green tea as an antioxidant. Including the flavonoids from green tea, the EGCG, reducing inflammation in the body. Again, pretty lofty recommendations, 3 to 5 cups a day. Yes, it is a caffeinated beverage, so that might not work out for everybody. Maybe they'll be going to the bathroom quite a bit. But you can also use a powdered green tea called a matcha, which is a very nice concentrated source of green tea. But when we're talking about the functional goals, it is, again, trying to get to the 3 to 5 cups. Turmeric. Curcuminoids are the active compounds in this beautiful yellow spice. If you care to tune into the Fox News on Thursday morning, I'm going to be showing people how to use turmeric to make frosting for cupcakes. That's natural. But again, we know that from the research that turmeric has many active compounds and targeted actions on the inflammatory pathways, also platelet aggregation inhibition, and the goals being about 1,100 milligrams per day of cumin, curcuminoids and turmeric. It is important to note that the absorption of turmeric is best when it is consumed in a fatty medium, which is what makes curries so beautiful with the coconut milk and the coconut oil, and when mixed with the active compound called pepperine of black pepper. Those properties are more available to the body. So how do we help patients with this information? Any ideas?
I just have a question. Could you take it with your fish oil to get the...
You could. Yeah. Interesting. Creative. Add it to eggs. Add it to soup. Take it with your fish oil. Some people do take it in an encapsulated form. We're kind of food forward people, so we like to teach patients how to use this in their cooking and how to, experiment a little more. Blue-green algae, spirulina, chlorella, teaspoon a day, which is 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams, are some great examples of anti-inflammatory effects of blue-green algae.
For the turmeric, it says 1,100 milligrams. How many teaspoons is that?
It's about a teaspoon. And then getting it to the plate. So how do we support patients in implementing some of these things? I'll go through these kind of quickly, but again, take-home messages. Really help our patients to boost their consumption of colorful fruits and veggies, help our patients get an oil change, encourage our patients to snack on walnuts instead of chips, eat whole intact grains such as oatmeal, eating fatty fish such as salmon 3 times a week, eating fewer fast foods, replace white potatoes with sweet potatoes, cutting down on sugary drinks, eating more lentils and beans, and munching on dark chocolate and fresh strawberries. I will just also say again, when we're doing intake food records with our patients, we really need to be careful about eliciting transparent answers. I had one kiddo, obese, type 2 diabetic. Food record sounded beautiful. I eat oatmeal every morning for breakfast. Parents, yes, they eat oatmeal. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I got really specific. What kind of oatmeal? You ready for this? Dinosaur egg, instant oatmeal. I won't even show you the ingredient label. It's really scary. So, we're going to talk just a little bit about clinical approaches. Again, where do we start? What is the first thing we're going to do with our patients? We're going to ask them to keep a diet journal, right? That may be harder than it sounds. And so when I can't get my patients, and you can, I think, vouch for this too, to keep a journal, because there's something about writing their food down that actually makes it real. I just ask them to snap pictures of their food and send it to me. Most people in this day of selfies and Instagram, people are photoing their food 24/7. Use this to your clinical advantage. Again, swapping some steak for some salmon. Keep your steak once a week. Add some fermented foods and eat some more Indian foods. I feel like I want to leave time for questions. We were going to share another case study about a patient with fibromyalgia. Do you want to talk any about?
I think we've actually covered this well. The one thing that I want to say about this was going to be the part where we talked a little bit about actually using supplements. And I think that we are talking about food and we are talking about diet. And ideally, that's where we want to go with our patients. And as Kim said, the only way to get those omega-3s is fish. And so pretty much everybody who walks out of my office walks out with a recommendation to take fish oil. There are just some times where we have to actually, go to the supplements. It's not our first choice. Vitamin D is another good example. We put a lot of people on a vitamin D supplement because it's just hard to come by in Vermont. So I just wanted to just sort of touch on that fact that, yes, we do actually use supplements, but we want to really help our patients learn how to incorporate this into their lifestyle. And then the only other thing was that I've had the opposite experience of Kim with patients where I think that maybe I was a little too enthusiastic and I said, you could do this with your diet and you could do that with your diet. And I'm thinking in particular, I had a young woman who was a patient who had just a number of things going on, joint pain and incontinence, and she was quite young. Some serious thyroid dysfunction, Hashimoto's, and I thought, well, this is a person that's going to be so motivated. And I started telling her, do this with your diet and do that with your diet. And she called me and said, like, I like who I am, and I'm not going to change my diet. And I was like, okay, let's back off and try adding some fish oil and some turmeric capsules. And that was actually easier for her to do to start with. So a little bit of flexibility in meeting people where they are. And, you know, I think that a lot of the times we think supplements are expensive and, you know, a little weird, but also a lot of patients come in expecting to walk out with a prescription. So just a little side note on that one.
There is a hand.
How do you judge the quality of your supplement?
Thank you for asking that, because I was kind of going to mention, you know, there are places for providers to go to see the evidence on supplements. Natural Standards Index is one. The National Institute of Health, on their complementary and alternative medicine portion of the website, they will, you know, show you the evidence where it exists. Good manufacturing, USP, which is the United Pharmacopoeia Standard, and good manufacturing processes are two stamps that you will often see on supplements that have been third-party tested. And that's really the best we have in this country because our supplement industry is poorly regulated, which is why a lot of people are a little wary of it. But just finding a supplement that has been third-party tested is at least one step towards knowing that you're actually getting or recommending something that has been demonstrated to actually have in it what it says it has, which is always a good starting place. I mean, we use professional grade supplements in our office. There are, again, some, you know, over like store brands that are really high quality. New Chapter Organics is one, for example. But I think that, again, there is evidence out there. Sometimes it's a supplement to take the place of something that's missing in the diet. In terms of inflammation, there's some great research that supports other things like boswellia as being great for inflammation, berberine, which Dianne is a big fan of, as being great for inflammation. Again, gamma-linoleic acid from borage oil or evening primrose oil, quercetin. So there are some other supplements that have more of a pharmacological effect that we will also sometimes recommend, but it's really individually advised. Questions about that?
Are you familiar with Nutrition Action?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like that publication?
Yeah.
Are there others that you recommend?
No, I like that. Nutrition Action Health Letter. Comes out every other month. It's one of the few nutrition publications that is relatively bias-free. Yeah. Other questions for Dianne or I?
Yes, when you reference the evidence, you talk about evidence as I've only heard in the laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if any of these studies that you're referencing, aside from being anti-inflammatory and showing decreased C-reactive protein, et cetera, have a proven clinical effect.
So, yeah, I mean, again, I can send you certainly the slides, which will have the references on them. Some of them are, you know, yes, lab, and I know that doesn't always transfer over. Some of it is epidemiology and kind of what we know from looking at different cultures and their eating habits. But that's, I think, a good place to close, which is in a quote that if evidence, this comes from the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, which is medical recommendations should be based on weighted consideration of possible benefits and harms of a particular intervention. So if evidence shows a food may reduce risk and the food is safe to eat, we should be recommending that food. So that is kind of the closing remarks. We were going to talk a little bit about this very interesting woman with 16-year history of fibromyalgia. I will just say it all worked out really well. She really came in and she was like, I will, kind of had this narrative of I will never be well. And she had done, I'm talking about her already because she was so fascinating. A mommy of 2 kids in a lot of pain. And she was eating already a gluten-free diet, which we don't recommend to everybody. Trust me, we're okay, we're not those people. But in her gluten-free diet, she was eating lots of processed gluten-free foods that were not high in fruits and veggies. She came in with her little corn crackers and her little nut thins, and she wasn't eating plants. She was eating potato starch and arrowroot. And I'm like, okay, great for the gluten-free, but we gotta take this up a level. And we did, and she did add some targeted supplements with her. We added 5-HTP, which has good clinical support for fibromyalgia. We added some magnesium. Again, it was very tailored to her, a probiotic. And she came in after about 6 to 8 months, and she said, I can't even believe that I'm saying this, but I feel good. So there's a lot of power. So this is kind of our summary and our little thank you with another quote, which is the human body heals itself and nutrition really just provides the resources to accomplish the task.